In this video, we're going to take a look at the process for enrolling and adding multiple students to the system at a time. So to do that, we're going to work in the student maintenance section, and we're going to go to the enroll student to a new section area. So I'm going to click on that tab to open it up. And as you've seen in the past, you are able to enroll a single student at one time. And the nice thing about that is being able to just quickly adjust enrollment for that. However, if you need to enroll a lot of students in lots of different courses, the enroll multiple students may actually work better for you. And what it allows you to do is not only enroll them into a course, but it also allows you to add them to the system at the same time. So if you needed to get a lot of students in, get them enrolled into courses, get all of that set up at once, you can do it all at the same time. So let's take a look at that. So if you've already created the file, you simply choose the file. In this case, let's walk through the first time you're doing this. So basically you're getting the template and you're working through that template. So to do that, I'm going to download the template here. You can see download template. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to ask me to save it in a CSV file. So the CSV file is what we're going to work with in order to do this. So I'm going to click on Save. Now in my case, because I'm using Chrome, it's going to be available down here. So I'm going to click on it in order to open it. And once that CSV file opens in Excel, we'll take a look at it together and we will put some information into it so that you can see how to populate that appropriately. So there we go. I'm just going to pull that over here. I'm going to extend it so we can take a look at it. So I'm going to make these a little bit bigger so that you can see what each of these titles is. That's not necessary to do this, but I think it makes it a little bit easier to see. Okay, so that's a little bit easier to read. So let's go through each one. Column A is the serial number. This is a number that you can use to help keep yourself organized. This is not something that the system will need, and in fact it will ignore this because it's not a piece of information that the system needs in order to enroll a student. This is more for if you were to do enrollment for 1,000 students. If you gave this column a number on each one, you'd be able to go back and look at the information that's displayed in the system later on in case there's a problem. So if 99 students out of the 100 the enrollment went fine, but one of them didn't go well, this serial number will let you identify, oh look, it's row 30 that has a problem. So it's more of a way to help you be organized and use this as a mass upload and enrollment feature. Department. Department is the course that you're rolling them into. So if it's a communication course, the title might be COMM. So the number, if it's a comm course, that's the 100 level, you'd put a 100 in that one. Section. This is the section of that course in which they're being enrolled. So it'll be the same number or letters or whatever set of information that you're using to designate what a section is called will be entered here. Trimester. This is also synonymous with term. So what term are you for which you're doing in the enrollment? Is it fall? Is it winter? Is it spring? Is it summer? Is it by month? It really could be any type of term that you're looking at, but that must match from that standpoint. First name is the first name of the student. Last name is the last name of the student. Now in some cultures and some areas you'll have 2 first names and 2 last names. You can enter both. That's not a problem. You do have a character limitation, but really it's been extended to 40 characters per. So it'll be difficult to run out of characters in those, but sometimes you have to get creative with the way that you enter them. Email. The email address is entered here, and always remember that the email address for anyone that you enter must be unique. So be thinking about that if you already have students entered, just making sure that all of that is unique. Username. This can be the username of a current student, or it can be a username that you're designated for a student that you're adding. If you leave it blank, that's fine too, and we'll look at those options here in just a moment. Password. If you wish to designate a password, you can. I use this when I do training where I'll give everybody the same password, or I will give them incremented passwords that are very similar, so that way I don't have to go and get a unique one for everyone. That's one way initially, once I get them set up with their accounts, and I then later say, okay, since I know your password, please go change it so that way you have a unique one. But that sometimes gives us a good way of making sure that everybody has what they need initially. External ID. Again, this is one that if you have it, like say you're using a student information system and each student has a colleague ID or some kind of student information system ID, you can enter that there. And finally, we have the status. The status tells us what are we doing with that student's information. Are we adding them, as in adding them to a course? Are we enrolling them into a course? Or are we adding them into the system? Are we enrolling them into a course? Are we dropping them from a course? Or are we putting them on hold, as in, yes, they're in the system, but they can't actually access the course for some reason. Maybe they've got an administrative hold or a business hold, and then resume after that hold has been resolved. So let's do an example. I'm going to set this serial number as 1 because this is my first line. Even though it's not the first line of the CSV, it's the first line that I'm adding data into. And we'll use BQL, which has been our example going forward, and then we'll use 200. Section is going to be D. Our trimester, or again term, would be the other name for that. The term is W15. First name, we'll add that in there. And this is information that I entered before. So I know for a fact in my case that this individual is already in the system. So really all I'm doing is adding their information in order to match it up with what is already in that system. And then username. Let's extend that out so I can work with it here. Password. I'm going to leave that blank because this person already has a password. External ID, I'm going to use this blank. You leave it blank because this individual already has one. And status will be add because I want to add them to the course as well as adding them to the system if I need to do that. So you might think that that's counterintuitive. You might think that there's a designation or status for enroll, but technically speaking, regardless of whether you're enrolling them or you're adding them to the system, you always do add. So in this case, let's think about this. So this person is already in the system, so we know that they exist. However, because they do exist and the system knows that, all it's going to do is enroll them into this course. That's it. It will ignore everything else. If for some reason that person is already in that course, it will look at this line, and as long as everything lines up, it'll just ignore what's there. So if you have a brand new person, it's going to act a little bit differently, but you're going to add the same information. So let's actually do that right now. So let's go to serial number 2 and do the same thing, same information. Let me show you a trick that I like to use. Makes it go a little bit faster. If you grab that little corner and drop down, it will copy that. Obviously that's not the only way to do it. Now you'll notice how this one incremented. That's okay. You go here and you click on the autofill options, and instead of filling a series, I'm going to copy. So now it's just 2015. I don't want to copy the name. I'm going to add a new name. And again, this is an individual who is not in the system yet. So I'm going to allow the system to designate a password, and I'm going to allow the system to designate an external ID, and I want to add that person. So now I have 2 people in my list. So imagine if you had 100 or 200. What are the things that you can do to make this go a little bit faster? If I'm doing lots of adds, I'm going to do that same procedure I did before. I'm going to drag that down, and that way I can just add the information in. If it's coming from another system, I can copy and paste those in as well. Same thing with the serial number. So let's use a slightly different. So this one we just copied each of those to get that many. And this one we want a series. So we're going to do the drop down, start to drag, and look at that. If I do it that way, I always get copies. So I'm going to delete those. And instead, I'm going to do my little drag down. And then I'm going to select Fill Series. And then as I drag it down, it increments each one. So you can see that's a pretty significant time saver if you want to generate those numbers. So I'm going to delete those since we don't need them for this particular situation, since we're only doing a couple. But again, as you can imagine, in looking at this, I could have a lot in this list. Okay, so I've added all of them in there. And another important point is you do need to make sure that the information is correct, or it's going to return results that are, it's going to say, hey, there's a problem with this. We're going to look at it as in it doesn't do that, but you get the idea. So if it does return issues, then you will be able to fix it and re-upload it. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to save this on my desktop because that's where it's living right now. As you can see, I've downloaded this before. So in my case, BQL 200. I'm going to call it a test. Then click Save. Now, don't be alarmed by this. It'll say some features will be lost if you save it as a CSV. And that's absolutely true. You are going to lose some features. In this case, though, that's okay. So yes, I want to keep using it. So now I'm going to close this. And if I wanted to resave it, I can. It's not a problem. So let's click No, and then we'll click Close. Don't save. It's going to ask you a couple of times, but that's all right. So now we want to choose that file, and now we're going to do the actual upload process. So let's click on Choose File. And then I'm going to go to my desktop so I can actually get to that file. I highly recommend having a very detailed process for this. If you don't have a student information system, this can become very messy and very cumbersome if you're not really careful. And the reason I say that is because a CSV file, although it is sortable and editable and everything like that, it still can be a bit cumbersome to work with. So be thinking about your system as you look at this. So we still have a very similar set of requirements here about generating usernames and passwords. So in the case of the individual I do want it to generate, oh no, I'm sorry, I don't. I added a username, but I want it to generate the password. I don't want to actually do that. I do want to send confirmation emails. And in this case, I do not, again, want to require the new password at login, but I could do that if I wanted to. So I've now made some choices, and I'm going to click Submit. It may take just a moment for it to process. As you'll notice, this went gray as it's processing. It's thinking about the file that I uploaded, and it's going to give me feedback. Here we go. So this is great. So the feedback I got is telling me that what I did was successful. Now you'll notice it says batch upload results, 2 records. And as you remember, I added 2 records to that, so 2 records were processed. And it says, well, one contains errors. Well, which one is it? Well, it happens to be my title row. So the headers obviously are not going to provide any real information. So that's not going to work. There's no information there. And so now what you're noticing here is that this is what you're going to see if there's an issue with a student record. In my case, there were no issues with student records, but it is telling me that there was information here that could not be processed. So that's very helpful in being able to discern what information worked and what didn't. And so that is how you use the CSV. Like I said, I showed you just a couple of examples, but again, my hope is that you'll see that there's a pattern to it that can be repeated for all of that information. Now let's go and take a look at the Jump To menu, and we should be able to, this is similar to a case I believe that you probably saw before in another video where it sometimes takes a few minutes for that content and the enrollment information to process. So it's certainly nothing to be concerned about, but you may need to wait 10-15 minutes. That seems to be the rule sometimes on this. Sometimes it's instantaneous, sometimes it's not. But I would say if you are, looking for something, I would plan ahead just to be absolutely sure that you're going to be able to provide the service that you're looking to provide. So we're going to let this load up. And now we're going to go to our roster and take a look. It's thinking pretty hard because I've got lots of things running on my computer right now. So this is not the system being slow, this is my system being slow. And so now we have our 2 instructors that we added earlier, and we have our 2 students. And so we have those by name just as we added them. And in fact, we can also tell that these individuals have never logged in. So we do know that they are part of the system, they have been enrolled, but they've not yet logged in because they were just added. So in this case, this was pretty fast. This instructor, when I added them, it took a few minutes for them to be added. So in any case, we just went through the process of using the CSV file to add information, to upload it, and then to verify that students have been enrolled using the bulk upload or the adding multiple students.